Charlie, I'm so excited. We're to step 10 already, which says continue to take personal inventory, and when we were wrong, promptly admitted it.
Yeah, good maintenance step, right? So we've worked through and we've talked about how, the three really spiritual principles that Dr. Bob gave us at the very beginning were, I don't know if I talked about this, but it's a good time to talk about it, that those famous pictures in the hospital beds where two men are facing each other, and there's Dr. Bob and Bill Wilson. And what they discovered after they could not stay sober alone, they kept finally going back to the hospital. And this one visit they had, they realized they couldn't do it alone, that they had to have each other, another alcoholic, to talk things over with and process things with. So I always say, like we used to say in the third grade, it takes one to know one.
Right.
So Dr. Bob came up with three spiritual principles that have worked in my life and continue to do so today. And number one is to trust God. You hear that in the program, and that means really trust in God. And the second one is clean house. And that doesn't mean to get your rubber gloves and your Clorox out and mop your floor. It means to clean out the inside of you. Do your inventory. Stop looking at everything on the outside and look inside and see what you need to look at within yourself. So the trust God, clean house, and the third one is work with others. And that's what we're doing by making this podcast, hopefully, is working with other people to try to help people to understand that you're not alone. You don't have to be alone. You can reach out. And today with the internet and with so many ways of communicating, you're never alone. You don't have to be alone. Even if you're in a dark bedroom somewhere where you think nobody's around or no one will understand, somebody will understand, somebody will hear you, and somebody will listen to you. So those three principles I know have really worked in a lot of people's lives, and they're really good ways to live by. But the 10th step is continuing to practice those by continuing to, on a daily basis, to take your own personal inventory. And then it says, when we were wrong, when you discover that you had a part in something and you're wrong, it says to promptly admit it. So it doesn't mean, procrastinate, put it on the back burner, wait a couple of weeks, and then maybe I'll decide to let you know that what I said wasn't correct or what I did. But the word promptly is defined as quickly or at once, immediately, without delay, or right away. So I think that this step is mostly probably people practice this at night, before they go to sleep. They say their prayer for the night and a thank you, and then they kind of look at where throughout the day have I been selfish or self-centered? Where do I owe an amends? What did I do that's not okay that I want to promptly correct? And some people work this in the morning. And I like to do that a lot of times, because sometimes at night, I'm too human. I get tired. I don't want to, or, I'm watching television. I'm doing something selfish, right? And I go to bed without reviewing my day. And in the morning is still promptly for looking back the day before and saying, what is it that I need to do? What is it that I need to talk about with maybe my sponsor or with someone that I know that I owe an amend to? Or maybe I just need to talk about some stuff. I don't know. So it's when we retire at night. Usually it talks about on page 86 and 87 of the big book. It says when we retire at night, that's the daily inventory that you use throughout your day. And you can use that to record in a lot of Dr. Carnes's 30 tasks and the steps that he recommends to do. That you have a recording of your thoughts and your feelings, and you make a little journal of what happened during the day. And those are your daily inventory worksheets. So some of the things to look at and some of the exercises to do are your personality characteristics of what self-will is. And self-will is different than God's will. So there's a list on at least my worksheet that I gave of working the steps, where you have a list of self-will, and then a list of God's will. And so those things, you know, like a few are considerate or inconsiderate. Let's see, which one do you think is mine? Well, inconsiderate, you know. So greedy or humility, giving, sharing, grateful, envious, angry, calm and serene. So you can kind of take a look at human will and what God's will might be for you. And any of those that you check off, you might want to take a look at and go back and review your day and promptly admit what to do. And this is a lifelong process. It's sort of, the 10th step to me is sort of like all the steps pushed in together of working them, of looking at me and what do I need to do to correct whatever it is that's going on. So it's a great, after you work the steps with somebody, it's a great way for you to look at yourself and daily maintenance and keep it going, keep your program going. Anything you want to add to the 10th step?
Well, I think for me, I've found that as time has gone on, I'm even quicker. You know, like for example, there was a situation where I was at the airport, I was in a line, and I said something to somebody, and the intention wasn't negative, but the way I said it sounded really kind of snotty and snarky, and you know, I left that interaction, and I thought, wow, that, you know, that wasn't who I really want to be. And lo and behold, I ended up in another line at Starbucks inside the airport with this person. And I turned to her and said, I'm so glad I ran into you, because I realized that what I said sounded, you know, not very nice. And I said, that was not my intention. What I meant was this. It came out wrong. And she was like, thank you so much for doing it. So like, it reframed all of that, but I know, like, I would have carried that, and I wouldn't have had the opportunity if I waited till the night or the morning. But I have found in my personal practice of this is, you know, I am quicker at understanding when something's off for me and trying to set that straight as quickly as possible. And sometimes they're you know, making those amends, just like we talked about, you know, in the previous steps. It's like, you know, like if I hadn't run into her, my amends would have had to be a global, and I'm sorry, and I'm praying good things for her or whatever. But I got the opportunity, you know, to do a personal one. And that, you know, I know it set things right for me, but, you know, the way she smiled, I'm sure she was like, wow, that person is, you know what, you know, and the opportunity to reframe, you know, I think both of our days, it was a 6 a.m. flight, you know, so, you know, but, you know, she was
kind of. People do appreciate that when you can just look at your own stuff and say that. It's amazing what happens.
Yes.
And even in that step 10, if you had not run into her, you could have possibly bought somebody else a cup of coffee.
Yes.
That day, or done it anonymously. But that cleans up your side of the street.
Yes.
That practices those principles of trust God, clean up your own house, and work with others. And so sometimes what I find is the same thing. Like I may have talked to somebody on the phone about my computer or something. I'll never get that person back for an airline reservation or whatever. And I don't have the opportunity to go make prompt amends to that person, but I do have an opportunity to do it with somebody. And so even doing that, working with others, works. Don't you think?
Oh yeah, I have and there was an incident right before one of my big sobriety birthdays. It's not an excuse. I was sick and, you know, whatever. Anyway, so I was not particularly nice to a TSA person, and I got through the TSA and I thought, this is not who I want to be. This is not, you know, so I tried to go back. Well, you can't go back into TSA. Nope. So my amends was I have to be kind to TSA people forever. Somebody said, that seems like an extreme. And I said, no, I need to be accountable because I don't want to repeat that. So I've made this is years ago. I made a conscious decision, and, you know, like if I see a TSA person, I'm like, I make sure I smile, I'm greeting them. I'm on the overly kind side just to make amends to that person that I can't go back to make amends to directly.
Wow, that's really neat, because the principles that are worked in this step are steadfastness. That's what I heard you doing. Steadfastness of purpose. You know, like, what was your purpose for that? Well, a purpose is, that's not me. That's not who I want to be. So I'll go back and make that. And then the other principles could be vigilance and promptness. So, I hear you doing that. That's great. And that's the way to work that in, if you realize that the exact person you meant to talk to or wanted to talk to is not available somehow. So there's always a way to clean up your side of the street.
Yes.
Is the good thing, right?
Yeah. Well, and it leaves or eliminates the negative baggage I'm carrying around. It's like, if I can clean that up, I'm not feeling shame about my action. I mean, like now I no longer feel shameful about what I did. It wasn't the right thing to do. I own it. But now I've got steps in place to make sure that I don't repeat it, and that I'm being kind to other people.
Yeah, that's right. You've taken the action you needed. So these are action steps. The 10th step is an action step, and it's one that requires immediate prompt action, it says. And that's what keeps us feeling good and being our best selves, I think, is to practice that 10th step on a regular basis, every day. It's a daily inventory, daily steps, all rolled into one. So it's kind of neat. And the 11th step talks about our difference between God's will and our will too. There's God in a dog suit. Yeah, I heard him in the background.
Yeah, my little Bosley was.
Yeah, so cute. So you want to read the 11th step and
sure.
Take a look at that.
It's sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God as we understood him, praying only for knowledge of his will for us and the power to carry that out.
Wow. Yeah, I know when I took a look at that step, I'm like, that step really taught me how to pray, because all of my prayers before I got into the program, were just marching orders for God. It's like, and then God, I'd really appreciate, make this person well, and this person do this, and this happened for me. And, a lot of it was very self-centered, just telling God what to do, quite frankly. So I realized that it helped me so much to be able to take that pressure and that load of having to decide when I was playing God or goddess, trying to decide what everybody needed, and then asking for it. So this way, it took so much pressure off of me to just know that all I ever have to do, because it says praying only. That word in there, only, is a big word. Only for one thing, and that is to ask for God's will. So I learned that it's okay to pray for myself if I want something for me, as long as I can be of use to God with it. And that was the only thing I had to learn how to ask for was, if I want to pray for a new car, that was self-centered. But if I prayed for God's will and what I would do with that new car, maybe take people to meetings and do service work in it, and take people food, or, there's all kinds of things. I go to work in it, which is service work, really, in a lot of ways. There's a lot of things I can do to ask for myself, but to ask for God's will to be done along with that. So conscious contact means, we're trying to improve our conscious contact. And what does that mean? That means our awareness of God and our personally felt, how do I feel when I talk to God? Or, we talked about this earlier on the first and second step. You don't even have to have a concept of God. You just have to do it, just say the prayer, and later it will come to you. So the conscious contact is that felt sense of awareness I have by a thought or an observation that I have with it. And then the contact means a state of condition or touching, meeting or communicating, or it's that relationship or that connection that I have with God. And so many of us that come into the program have, connection and awareness wounds from our childhoods,
Yeah.
We talk about connection and our attachment wounds and things. That's about connection with something. So people that have attachment wounds, have a tendency to stick to places and things rather than people. So this concept of a higher power, it means we're going to make conscious contact with that and improve that. And meditation is purpose of intentional focusing on one's thoughts to reflect upon or to ponder, consider thoughtfully, or to contemplate. That's a meditative thing that we do in this step. And prayer is just a call upon or a request for help. That's all it
wow.
is. It's
Okay.
just talking to God. That's the definition. Call upon for or request help. And isn't that what we do when we call 911? We're just like, help, somebody's bleeding or somebody's heart's not beating or what, help, you know? And we can literally do that on a daily basis by just practicing the 11th step, call God. And sought, sought means to seek. So that thing about, seeking God and the ABCs that we talked about earlier, that our lives are out of control. We can't manage them ourselves, and that no human power could have relieved it. And C, that God could and would if he were sought. So seeking God through working the 11th step is really important, I think, to understand that. And to understand that you don't have to understand. You just have to do it again. Making the 11th step prayer there's a beautiful daily prayer, and making time every day to find that time to discuss with God every day, to ask for what is your will for me. And if you've done your 10th step, like that thing in the step guide, you've had a list of God's will and your will, so you know what you want to ask for God's will to be done. And that's what you're doing when you ask for this 11th step. You make that commitment. It's very important to make conscious contact every day and to pray only for God's will for you. And then you let go and you let God. You practice the things on the wall, the sayings on the wall. You let go and you let God. And you do that thing that Dr. Bob said, trust God. And that's how you find out what's meant for you. And all the universes and all the things that come together at the exact moment they come together, they're just right somehow. Practicing that with the 11th step. I love the 11th step. Taught me how to pray. Anything you want to add to that?
Well, I was thinking, like when you're talking about the car, it's like, my prayer ended up, because I was in this situation. I had a car accident. And you know how they say you can do anything sober that you did drunk? Well, I had a major car accident when I was drunk and then got sober. And then I had a major car accident after I was sober. I'm actually a good driver, but that's a whole nother thing. But what I ended up praying for was transportation. I needed, because I wanted the cool car and all of that kind of stuff. And somebody pointed out to me, you need transportation. So I prayed that God would guide me to the right mode of transportation. And I got a car, and it wasn't, the image car and all of that.
Yeah, it wasn't the one you wanted.
But it was dependable. It was reliable. It was solid on the road, even in icy roads. It was all, and so it helped, that was kind of the knowledge of his will for me was you need good transportation, affordable transportation. You don't need, all the bells at that time. So
at that time, right, exactly. So that was God's will for you. You got to find that out, didn't you? Yeah, that's so neat. So that contacting and being consciously aware is that oneness that we need to practice. Again, that's a spiritual principle of practicing step 11, is that we become one with, or we, the first word of the first step, the we thing that I said, what I came to believe for me, it was me and God and the people in the room. So the rest of the group can include God always, no matter what I'm doing, whether I'm praying for, my security or my, whatever part of my life I think is missing or I need help with. I just consciously go to God and practice that oneness, talk to God in any way I know how to, and then let go of that and see what happens, what God's will is for me. So practicing patience, practicing oneness, awareness, discipline, those are the spiritual principles we think of that go along with the 11th step.
Yeah, I think so too. And I think, just I have to be willing, because you said, even if you don't believe it, just do it. And I have to be willing to try this. And hopefully by the time people are starting on the 10th, 11th, and 12th, they're finding that some of the promises have come true and that some of the things in their life are getting better and that they've had some success with, making an amends or, cleaning up their side of the street, et cetera. So it's easier to engage with the maintenance steps.
It is. And I'm glad you mentioned the promises, because we didn't really talk about them, but It says before we're halfway through, or about halfway through. So about half of 12 is somewhere along the 5th or 6th step, along in that area of doing this work. You should feel a lot of relief and that new power come in. So these are like maintenance things to keep that going and to keep you, keep that new self that's clean on the inside, that trusts God and not playing God, and get your life back in order.
Yeah, and I found I had less tolerance for, I didn't want to keep adding the garbage. If I just cleaned it all out, you know, it's like I want to keep it clean. It's easier to keep it clean than to have to look at, you know, getting the U-Haul and a shovel to get things out again.
Yeah. It's so amazing when you just really do become willing to just say, God, what is your will for me? And then you just kind of step back, let go, and you see what happens. That's like, oh, and it isn't always what you want or what you think is best, but it obviously has to be in order. So all you have to do is just live in that moment, you know?
Yes.
And so now we're at step 12.
Which says, having had a spiritual awakening as the result of these steps, we tried to carry this message to alcoholics and to practice these principles in all our affairs.
And, you know, step 12 is a guarantee. It's kind of nice to get a guarantee, isn't it? It's a promise that if we take the first 11 steps, we would enter a new relationship with God, and our understanding that we would have the elements of a way of living, an inner resource, a spiritual toolkit would answer all of our problems. And that's the promise here. It's the result of these steps that we've worked, 1 through 11, that we get this promise. So if you read page 89 through about 103 in the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous, it suggested that you read them and, you know, underline those areas that are important to you. But an awakening means to become aware or conscious of something. So having had a spiritual awakening, now there's going to be all kinds of new things that are going to come about in your spirit. And that's what that is. It's becoming conscious of that. And it says practice means to perform or work at repeatedly so as to become proficient. So that's, we practice this, you know, we just keep doing it so we get better and better, we get more proficient at it. And you have to do that practice over and over for anything to change. And the principles are basic truths or laws, they're standards, they're qualities, they're assumptions or codes of conduct. So that's what we talk about when we say with these principles that we're talking about that underlie each one of these steps. And it tells us that we are practicing these principles in all of our affairs. So even if you're standing in line at the airport, or at home with the people you love the most, or you're on the telephone, or you're somewhere in a relationship with another human being or an animal, you've got to be aware of your part of it. The spirit, so spiritual means of the spirit or soul as distinguished from the body or material matters, or of form or pertaining to a higher power. So this step is that guarantee that if you will practice all these principles in your affairs and work with others, that third principle that Dr. Bob gave us, work with others, that you will have a spiritual awakening. And you will continue to do that. In other words, you'll continue to grow as you go along and work these steps in your life. Because I've worked them many, many times, thinking that that 10th step sort of takes into consideration all of them to that point, you know, where if I keep my side of the street clean, I'm going to be okay. And stick with God, trust God, and keep cleaning my own house. I will get there. I have gotten all the promises have come true for me. And they're certainly worth looking at and worth reading. There is a long version of the 11th step and the 12th step prayer that's in our literature. But the prayers that are in the program are the Serenity Prayer, the 3rd step prayer, the 7th step prayer, and the 11th step prayer, which is in the alcoholic book of the steps and the traditions, you know, the 12 and 12 it's called. It's on page 99, and that's the 11th step prayer is on that page 99 in that book. So the last thing I'd like to say about this, to kind of wind this up for the 12th step, and I've enjoyed being with you during these times. Thank you for everything, Tammy, is that I remember when I first came in the program, I heard this language of, we will be rocketed into the fourth dimension. And I remember when I heard that, it's like, yeah, I love that language. Like, who thought of that? Rocketed into the fourth dimension. I want to go there. And it took me a lot of years to realize where the fourth dimension is. And I've come to believe that the fourth dimension is right here and right now, in the here and now. And so learning to live, I thought that was a pretty clever way for Bill to weave in how he could talk about one day at a time. And so he says it in different ways in the book, but being rocketed into the fourth dimension means after you work those steps. And that's on page 8 of the big book. You can read that sentence. It means to stay in the here and now and not to get too far out, because we really cannot predict the future. And the past is over. It's done. And so we forgive it. We look at it. We do better. I believe people do better when they know better.
But we're still human, so that's why we have the cleanup steps too. So
yes, that's right. Keep maintaining and keeping our house clean. That's right. Anything else, Tammy?
Well, I just, on step 12, that has come to be my favorite step, because it's having had a spiritual awakening as the result of these steps. We're not promised that all our problems are going to go away. We're not promised that we'll be removed from our addiction or anything else, but we're given all of these tools in order to live a different way. Even, I will always be an addict, but I can remain a recovering, addict versus one that's actively, in my addiction. And go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, that reminds me of, thank goodness we don't have to be perfect. It says we just grow along spiritual lines.
Right. But this is the only thing we're promised. Like in the we're not promised that, we won't be an alcoholic, or that everything else will be perfect and we'll be living in a bed of roses. It's just, we'll have a spiritual awakening that will give us a different frame for living life on life's terms.
Yes, indeed. Yes. Thank you so much, Tammy, for all this.
Thank you. It's been great. So for those of you that want to follow along in the workbook, it's on charlierisien.com. You can find it, download it for free. So Charlie, CHRLIE, Risien, RISIEN.com. Is the website, and we'll have that posted on our website as well. But we're so grateful for all the work that you put into this. I appreciate that the guideline for people who just need to figure out how to go through this and don't maybe have the support, or it's 2:00 in the morning and they're not, they're going, I don't know what to do. So this is a great way to really unpack what the 12 steps are looking to have us do.
Thank you, Tammy.
Thank you.